Well, Pastor Brady, thank you so much for joining me again on Lynch for the Leader. It's an honor to have you back.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is one of my favorite spots to hang out. You're so full of joy, and you love sports, and you're a pastor, and I just love your heart, and so it's an honor to be with you.
Well, you have an awesome new book out, and it is so good. And it's going to be hitting right when this is releasing. You said this is book number how many now?
Book number 9 and 10. So these are two different projects. One is a book, and one is a Bible study with 9 full-length videos with a QR code inside the Bible study. So two different projects, but I'm so proud of them. As I was telling you earlier, I have never worked harder on a book and a Bible study than I worked on this, because I think it's such a needed topic. It's a difficult topic. It's hard for people who a lot of people just want a good fight. They're not looking for unity. They're not looking for peace. But I pray that there would be a few dozen people out there that are honestly trying to follow Jesus in the narrow path of unity, and would be willing to take this journey with me. I know it's not easier. It's easier to be angry.
Yep.
It's easier to fuss and fight. But I think the Lord's calling us to rise above that right now, to be peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, the Bible says, and so that's a commitment I made to my congregation 17 years ago. Is that I told them, I said, when politics get vitriol and turbulent and chaotic, I will be the voice of reason. I'll be the voice of calm. I'll try to bring wisdom into the argument. I'll look for places to make peace. That's not a cowardly act. It actually takes more courage right now to be peaceful, angry. Because anger right now is just cheap currency. It's just cheap. It's easy to be angry. It's easy to get clicks on your social media sites for outlandish comments. I just think as mature Christians, we need to rise above that. And that's why I wrote the book. Maybe I just wrote it for myself. I don't know. Maybe I just need to remind myself to not be a knucklehead right now during this political turmoil that we're living in. And I'm prone to being a knucklehead. So maybe this book will help me be a better person right now.
Well, I know in the book on spiritual leadership by Richard and Henry Blackaby, they talk about noble, somebody who's noble. Why is unity so important to the Lord? And you do such a great job in this book breaking down unity and its importance. Why does unity matter so so much to God? Because he had a lot to say about it.
Well, as a dad, you know this, that nothing makes your heart come alive more than when your children are loving each other and serving each other and watching them get along. And obviously, I have a son and a daughter, and sometimes they'll fuss and argue like all brothers and sisters do. But, as we're recording this podcast, my adult kids are about to go on a trip together just to go and have some fun together. They're friends. They care about each other. They check on one another. They live together actually in a house right now. Neither one of them are married, so they're roommates. And that makes my dad heart come alive. And I think God has the same feelings about us. He looks down and he says, look, I love you. I've forgiven you. I've chosen you. I've adopted you. Now treat each other like you belong to the same family. And right now, he's got to be aggravated with the way we talk with one another, the way we condemn one another, the way we are quick. Here's the thing, Pastor. I'm shocked at how quickly we will believe the worst about another person. Instead of believing the best about another person, instead of giving someone the benefit of the doubt and maybe calling and checking on them, we're quick to believe gossip. We're quick to believe the worst reports. And probably worse, we're quick to spread the bad reports. Listening to gossip is bad enough. Repeating it is awful. And I think right now we're living in an age where gossip is cheap. Gossip is currency. It's easy to weaponize bad news. And it makes my pastor's heart sad to watch people behave that way. I don't behave that way in private. My wife and I are people of peace. And I think it's time for us to be peacemakers. I tell a story in Life Minded, several stories, in fact, of people walking into chaotic situations and bringing peace with them. So it's not checking your convictions at the door. It's not that sometimes a good spiritual fight is exactly what is needed, but let's fight in the spiritual realm with spiritual weapons. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty for the pulling down of strongholds. And I think we've started using carnal weapons to fight carnal battles instead of spiritual weapons to fight spiritual battles. And I think we're weak and powerless when we fight dragon wars by the ways of the dragon instead of fighting dragon wars by the way of the lamb. And the book of Revelation talks about that we have a choice to make. Will we use the methods and the ways of the world to fight worldly battles, or will we rise above it and use spiritual weapons to fight the battles that we're in? And it's naive for me to say that we're not in a spiritual battle. I mean, good grief. I'm 57 years old. I've never seen a chaotic presidential election like the one we're watching right now. In an 8-day period, one of the candidates got shot and another candidate drops out and disappears for 4 days. I have never experienced anything like that. I think it's unsettling to people. Obviously, it has unsettled Colorado. It's unsettled my congregation. And I think it's really, really a calling right now for pastors and leaders to be a calming, settling, stable voice in a world that's gone completely mad with murder and violence. I mean, it's insanity out there.
You talk about, and we're going to get into these 8 practices to belonging. We're going to snapshot a few of them. We look at the world and go, well, they don't care about God, but I think they do. Why does unity draw in people to want to belong to something where disunity, if they look in at the church and they see disunity, they want nothing to do with belonging to those people? Why is there a sense of belonging when we don't think that there is?
Well, the book of John says, Jesus said, your love for one another is proof to the world that you're my disciples. And I think when they look inside the church, if they see the same fussing and fighting and gossiping and bickering that they see out in the streets, there's no reason for them to join the church. It's just another set of problems. But what would happen if the church is actually the reflection of the kingdom of heaven on the earth? What if they looked inside the church and they saw black, white, and brown people, men and women, rich and poor, even some liberals and libertarians and conservatives? What if they saw all of us in the room working out our disagreements, caring sincerely for one another, praying for one another, thinking the best of one another, serving one another? Well, then that becomes an intoxicating community for a group of people. And listen, you can't find that anywhere else. You can't find calm presence anywhere else except the church. You come into the church, we're singing the same hymns we've been singing. We're preaching out of sacred texts. We have long-standing friendships inside that building. That is something you cannot find in the political realm. Can't find it in the economy. You can't find it in anywhere else. So the church has a unique opportunity right now to model something that the world is hungry for. Instead, in many cases, the church has entered right into the fight and has become a part of the problem. And I just tell my pastor friends, listen, they're listening to pundits 7 days a week. So when they come to my church, don't be a spiritual pundit. Be a pastor, be a shepherd, be a teacher of the word, be prepared to preach the gospel, because it's the only place they're hearing it right now is in the church.
That's so good. You tell a story in the book about growing up in Louisiana, and you said, I didn't grow up in a super wealthy family, but we did something really interesting, and it happened around the dinner table. What was the power of the dinner table? You're 57 now. This is back in the rearview mirror. We're looking back a little bit. But what are some things your parents figured out by y'all eating together every night that play into unity and belonging and finding out how bad we really do need each other?
Yeah, we ate breakfast and dinner together almost 7 days a week. So my mom would gather us around the breakfast table. My dad usually was already gone for the day because he had to get to work early. But we sat around a table and ate breakfast before we went to school. My mom would have eggs and bacon and whatever the farm had produced. We lived on a little 3 or 4 acre farm. We had cows, pigs, a big garden. So we always had fresh vegetables. We always had pork. We always had eggs. And so that was typically the breakfast. But my mom and dad did something at night. There was always a convening. It was a convention of the family every evening as we sat. And we would talk about what had happened that day. And it was a way to put a period, an exclamation point to the end of every day. And here's what's happening in our culture today. We're going to bed with unclaimed anxiety. We're going to bed with anxiety that's not been dealt with. So we wake up with a compounded, multiplied anxiety. But that dinner table was a way to kind of empty our souls. Now, my mom and dad, they weren't scientists, they weren't therapists. They were just good country people. They loved Jesus and they worked hard. They're blue collar. My mom and dad, my mom never graduated high school. In fact, my dad graduated high school. I was the first person in my family to graduate college. And so, but what they did is they listened to us, they talked to us, they cared about us, and I think more powerfully, they were present with us. So I look back now and think, man, I was so fortunate to have a mom and a dad in the same house every single night. My dad did not become a believer until after I was in college. So I didn't grow up with a dad who talked about Jesus. He talked about shotguns and bird dogs and horses and duck hunting and the garden stuff. That's what he talked about. What stuff at work. My mom talked about Jesus. She was a prayerful woman, a real spiritual woman. We went to church three times a week: Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and any other night they had something. My mom would pack us in the car. My dad would stay home and watch the ball game, and we would be at church. And so I'm grateful that I had an opportunity to be a part of that kind of family. I think it settled my soul. It gave me a place to empty my anxieties at night. I went to bed, I slept well, I woke up feeling good. I felt safe. I felt protected. I felt cared for. I felt known. That's the power of family. And so if the enemy wants to destroy a culture, he comes after the family first. So if he can break the family down, if he can create, if he can create divorce and adulterous affairs and division and strife, then he has a chance to disrupt a culture. But when a culture is committed to being together as families, it's almost an unstoppable force on the planet. So I had a lot of things to overcome when I was a kid. We were always poor. I had 2 open heart surgeries by the time I was 4 years old.
Holy moly.
Barely survived both of those. I had a very rare heart condition that most kids died of in 1967. So it wasn't that we didn't have challenges, and we certainly didn't have any money, but what we had was each other. We did have each other, and we had Jesus. And it turns out that when you have Jesus in a family, you can overcome a lot.
That's so good. You talk in the book about the craziness of 2020 and how everybody in the world if you agreed with somebody, then you disagreed with them. And when you disagreed with them, they were mad. And it didn't matter the side. It could be we got into it. We all lived the same thing. Is it mask? No mask? Is it you told somebody how to vote or you didn't tell somebody how to vote? All the things. How did you survive somebody who is a peacemaker and a unifier? How in the world did you survive healthy through that crazy season and not let it affect you as a Christ follower and as a father and a husband? How did you protect your heart during that?
Well, to be very candid with you, and obviously to be honest with you, it was very painful. I didn't come out of that without scars, and I think we all came out of it hurt and wounded. I lost friends. I lost some people that I thought would be my friends the rest of my life that I haven't talked to in now in 3 or 4 years, and that's sad to me. So I had to grieve the loss of some friends. I had to cling closer to some really close friends that I knew would be with me. I had to lean in on them a little more. I'm grateful that I have a wife that I've been married to her almost 35 years. We're best friends. I got 2 really good adult children that I just adore. And so, you lean into the people that you can depend on in those seasons, and you learn who your friends are, and you grieve the fact that you lose people that you thought were your friends. I'll tell you one story, Mike. This is a great story, Pastor. We were out doing some hunting in Southwest Arkansas, and we'd been hunting all day long. It was in the December of 2021, so it was about a year after COVID. And I was with 2 friends that I'd known for over 20 years. And we were sitting at this little hole in the wall Mexican restaurant, and over 2 hours of fajitas and guacamole and queso, We talked about mask mandates. We talked about the elections. We talked about vaccines. We talked about the racism that had, swept over our country, the racial riots. I mean, every hot button topic of 2021, we sat there at that table and talked. And the three of us did not agree on everything. And we would, push back on each other. And we never yelled at each other because we're good friends. We love each other, but we were aggressive in our language toward one another and challenging one another and confronting one another and laughing and all that, all the stuff that friends do. And there was a woman sitting next to us with her two kids. She sat there the whole time, the entire 2 hours, eavesdropping, really, because she was fascinated by what we were talking about. So we got up and she said, "Hey, I'm so sorry I was eavesdropping, but we're the only two people in the restaurant." She said, "So it was easy to listen to you guys." She said, "Who are y'all? Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a pastor in Colorado. This is my friend. He owns some property down the street. We've been hunting on his property. And this is my friend. He owns a business in Dallas, Fort Worth, but we've been friends for over 20 years. And here's what she said to me. She said, "I can't believe that three people just sat there and talked about the topics that you talked about without dissolving your friendship. Y'all didn't yell. Y'all still love each other." She goes, "I have never had a friend like that." And I said, "Well, we're very blessed that the three of us have been friends for all these years. And it takes a long time to become old friends. And so we're willing to fight to keep it." And so she was just moved by it. And so it was just that's a story that I think it's possible for us to sit down. I just read a study, and I mentioned in the book, that among your closest friends, Mike, you're only going to agree with them about 80% of the time. And those are your close friends.
That's right.
About 80%. And so it's shocking to us when we bump into that other 20%. I can't believe you don't agree with me on that. Now, I'm not talking about the non-negotiables of our faith. I'm not talking about disagreeing on that. Those things are non-negotiable to me. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, the scriptures. I'm talking about just differences of opinion.
Yep, that's right.
Your closest friends are going to have about 20% different opinions than you. So we got to learn to live with that. We got to learn to give grace, right?
That's exactly right. And you do such a great job. And I think part of it's your temperament and your personality, but you do such a great job breaking down these practices of belonging to God and to each other. And I think you present it in Life Minded in such a way, everybody goes, yes, that's what I want. I want to know how God feels about me, and I want to know how others feel about me. And so we're going to take 3 of your 8 practices and just sort of do a flyover with them. Devotion. Okay. You said God is speaking. God is speaking to us all the time. How have you learned to train your ear to his voice? How have you learned to know when the Lord is speaking to you? How have you done that?
Well, obviously, it starts with reading the Bible every day. I know that sounds old school, but I still believe if you're going to follow Jesus, one of the best practices is to open up those scriptures every day and let those scriptures speak to you. Read them as if you're having a conversation with the Lord. Don't read them as a student necessarily, although I believe in studying the scriptures, but read it as a conversation. Read it as a sit down with God, and he's talking to you. He's telling you a story. I tell the story one time when I first started dating Pam. This was back, I'm from the 1900s, so back before caller ID. Somebody could call your house and you didn't know who was calling.
Yep.
And when I first met Pam, there was actually 2 or 3 girls that I was kind of interested in, and I just met Pam, and so she called the house one day, and I had a split second. You know how dangerous this is. I had to get her name right. I had to know who was calling me, because there was 2 or 3 other girls that would call the house from time to time. And man, to my surprise, I got it right. I went, "Hey, Pam." And she goes, "Hey." And this relief came over me that I got right. Actually, I was more interested in Pam than anybody else. And so when she called, I was grateful. All right. Now, I've been married now for 35 years, Mike. I can walk in a room and Pam can give me one look and it's paragraphs of information.
Yes. Yes.
Right. You know that as a married man, they train us well. So what I'm saying is that how did I go from not recognizing Pam's voice to now reading her subtle expressions and getting all kinds of information? The reason I can do that now is because Pam's voice has become exclusive to me.
That's good.
And I talk to her every day. So that's the same way it is with hearing the voice of the Lord, in my opinion. talk to God every day. In the first few years, you may get it wrong. You may not understand all of it, but if you're talking with him every day, reading the scriptures every day, there will come a time where his voice and his voice is exclusive to you. I am not looking for answers anywhere else but Jesus. Jesus is my source for life right now. And so if you will make up your mind like that in a few years, be patient. As you grow older, now I feel like the Lord can whisper to me, and I hear him and I understand him, and I know the nudges, the leanings. I'm not talking about a voice from heaven. I'm not talking about an angel at the foot of my bed. I'm just saying during the day, I'm nudged, I'm led, I'm guided by something that I know is outside of myself, and it's the Lord leading me beside still waters. He's leading me into green pastures. He's restoring my soul. I believe in all that. And I believe it's possible for every believer to be led by the Lord all day. I really do believe that.
You know, we've got business owners, we've got pro baseball scouts, we've got college baseball coaches and football coaches and executives listening and watching this call. And it's so easy for somebody who doesn't have the training that Pastor Brady does, or maybe that I do, and go, man, I'll never be able to achieve that. What would you say to someone about how much God desires for them to have him, even in the world that they're doing something that isn't at a church every day? Can they still have the same thing that you have?
Absolutely. This is not exclusive to pastors or bishops or prophets or priests. This is a gift from the Lord. Jesus said, my sheep will know my voice. My sheep, the people that are following me, he said, I will speak to them and they will know my voice. This is for every single person who's made up their mind to follow Jesus, if you consider yourself a follower of Jesus, it means you're a sheep of his pasture, and it means he's your shepherd. And if the shepherd is speaking to his sheep, I believe every sheep can hear the shepherd's voice. And I think it starts obviously with prayer and reading the scriptures, and also hanging around godly, wise people that can kind of point you in the right direction, and don't move to Africa based on this podcast unless you go take this before somebody. Use wisdom, use discretion. But I do believe it's possible for everyone to be led like this.
What's the difference between being devoted to God and I attend church? I just show up and go to church. What's the difference in that word devotion?
Well, I do. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of cultural Christianity right now. People identifying as a Christian. Eugene Peterson says people love to be around holy things. They're just not necessarily willing to work on being holy. And I do think there's an attraction to holiness. Like you get around something sacred and holy, it feels good. I mean, you get around someone that really knows Jesus, really knows how to pray. I think people see that and they admire that, but that's not where you're supposed to stop. God's calling us all into a real relationship with him. That holiness and a relationship with the Lord is for everyone. And so if you're out there today and you're exploring Christianity, if you're kind of hanging out at church, that's not all there is in life. And there'll come a day when the Lord's going to ask you to come and follow him. Come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Well, these were men that were hanging around Jesus because they enjoyed his miracles. They loved watching him raise people from the dead and turn bread and, turns water into wine and those things. But there was a time where Jesus looked at those guys and said, hey, you've been following me around. You like holy stuff, but now take up your cross and follow me. And that was the moment that every person has to decide, do you want to just hang out with holy things or do you want to follow him? And I think the invitation today is for people to follow Jesus. Come follow him.
When was the pivot in your life that you went from being somebody who was around it to I'm devoted, I'm all in? What was that pivot point for you?
August of 1988. I was driving home from a date with Pam on a Saturday night, and the Holy Spirit had been dealing with me about my walk. I was about to get married. I was about to go into the business world. I knew that if I was at a crossroads. Who would I follow? I was smart enough. I knew that I was, capable enough, ambitious enough to make a life on my own. But I also knew that I was prone to messing it all up. And it was that night where I pulled over on the side of the road. I felt like Wesley said, a warm, strange warmness inside of me.
Mm.
I knew that God was in the vehicle with me, and that red S15 Chevy S15 as I was in suddenly became a holy temple to me. And I prayed right there on the back roads of North Louisiana on my way home, and something changed inside of me. And I was, in fact, when I woke up the next morning, I was living with my parents then because I was saving up my money to get married. And I walked in to the kitchen that morning on a Sunday morning, and my mom, who had been praying for me, said, "What in the world? Something has happened to you." She noticed a physical difference on my face. She said, "What
Wow.
happened?" I said, "Well, Mom, last night I felt like I got serious with the Lord." And she said, "You look different." And that was, I do think there's proof
Yeah.
that you really had an encounter with Jesus at some point.
It's so funny. Yeah, there's a couple key spots in my spiritual journey that I love going back to remind myself of when that started, because the further you get out the rearview mirror, you can forget what that truck felt like that night and what that experience felt like that when you threw your nets down and went, all right, I'm all in, I'm following. You do a great job too. And one of the other ones I love, one of your practices, is the practice of curiosity. Why is it so easy as a leader? We have great spiritual leaders that listen to this from literally all walks of life. Why is it so easy to lose our curiosity about
Well,
God, others? What would you say?
Well, I think we get bored with life. The most interesting people I know are people that ask good questions. A lot of times people think I'm interesting because I know a lot, and that may be true. There are certainly some genius people out there that are very interesting, but the people that I enjoy hanging around are good question. You do a great job of this. You're a great interviewer, and one of the reasons I love being on your podcast is how well you ask a question. And you're genuinely curious about the answer that I'm going to give. That's a unique gift. It makes people want to be around leaders like you when you ask a question. And one of the things I say in the book is, instead of arguing with someone, let's say someone says, I believe in this, and it's the big thing, and you're upset. One of the things I say in the book is, instead of getting into an argument with them, ask them this question: when did you first start caring about that?
Mm, mm.
Yeah, like tell me the story of when that issue became so important to you. I'd love to hear how you became so interested in that topic. And what that does is that disarms people.
It
Like,
does.
hey, yeah, no, I don't agree with you, but I am really fascinated. When did you start becoming interested in that? What were some of the events in your life that caused this particular belief to become so important to you? And then really listen for the answer. And what that does is that de-escalates the conversation. It makes you genuinely curious about another human being. You see them as a human being and not as a target for attack. And those are some of the practical things I talk about in the book. I've learned how to do that. That does not come natural to me. I would rather argue. If I could be truthful, I'd rather get into an argument and set them straight. But I do know that I've never led anybody to the Lord by winning an argument.
That's right.
I've never led anybody to the Lord by being right.
Mm.
I've led people to the Lord by loving them, caring about them, and really getting on a long journey with them. And sometimes when you're on a long journey with someone who's really wrong, it's painful.
Yes.
But keep asking questions. Keep showing genuine interest in the people around you that are frustrating you right now. Maybe there's a group of people really aggravating you. Start showing some genuine interest in them, and it will disarm the future conversations. They will actually open up more to you when you show great interest. So that's what I'm talking about in that book, about curiosity, about, go out for a walk and discover something new in your neighborhood. Just meet someone new. Like I told my church last week, I said, some of you are worried more about who the Antichrist is, and you don't even know who your neighbor is. So, like,
That is so good.
Instead of spending 3 hours listening to some podcast trying to figure out who the Antichrist is, go find the widow in your neighborhood that needs groceries delivered.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good. I had Bob Tiede. Most people don't know Bob. He's with Campus Crusade. Wrote a book called Leading by Asking Questions. It's phenomenal. Nobody knew him. I just happened to run on the book. Learned so much from him about the power of questions and how Jesus used questions. He was the greatest question asker. And I remember Bob going, Mike, you've always got to remember You when somebody gives an answer, you either want to be interested or interesting. If you're interested, you ask another question. If you want to be interesting, you tell them a story. Well, that's me. And I'm like, God, did somebody call you and tell you I was going to ask you that question? Because I always love telling a story. And the power of curiosity is amazing because people go home and they think, wow, Pastor Brady, he genuinely heard me. He may have disagreed with me, but he heard me. How do you protect your heart? And you spend a little time in this in the chapter from prejudice and bias. There are things that you're against. There are things that you don't support. How do you protect your heart from still being curious with somebody you disagree with, but yet protect your core value? And I think it's always a worry of people. I don't want it to influence my core values or my belief system. What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, I'm 57. I followed the Lord for 30 years. I'm in the scriptures every day. So I'm not exactly can I be deceived? Yes, we all can be deceived, and we can all be tricked, and we can all be fooled. So I would be naive to say that I could not be. But I also believe that I'm at a place in my life where I can take a few more risks with people because I really do know what I believe. I'm convinced of my core values. I would tell 20 somethings, maybe high school students, to be a little more cautious. I mean, don't dive into relationships that can be harmful. But I'm at an age where that is not as a big a problem for me anymore. I'm happily married. I'm a lifelong learner, but I do listen to things that I don't agree with on purpose. There are commentators that I listen to, and I'll tell you why. It helps my preaching. If you really want to reach lost people, you have to learn what lost people are talking about. Because I think a lot of times as pastors, we're answering questions that they're not asking. And the key to reaching lost people in your community is being aware of the conversations that they're having. So I listen to some things that, gosh, that is way outside the bounds of Orthodox Christianity, but I'm listening to the questions they're asking. I'm listening to their points of pain, their struggles, their concerns, so that when I stand in the pulpit and I say, hey, I know what you're concerned about. I know where your family is struggling. I know the questions that you're asking, and let me speak to those. It immediately opens the door to their hearts. Like, hey, this pastor is aware of what's going on in my community. This pastor is aware of what it feels like to grow up in a single parent household, or this pastor is aware of what it feels like to be strung out on heroin. Now, I didn't grow up in a single parent household. I've never been strung out on heroin. I've never been tempted with same-sex attraction, those kinds of things. But I am listening to the people who are, so that I can speak to them when I get the opportunity. So there is a fine line about what you allow into your soul. I'm actually doing it because I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious about what's happening in the lives of people. And I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing so many salvations right now at New Life. We pray for the lost. We care about the lost. We still believe the Great Commission is our mandate. I care more about what people believe than I care about how they're voting. I do care about politics, but I'm much more concerned about if they're saved, if they know Jesus. Have they had an opportunity to hear good news? And I think we have to keep that at the forefront of all of our preaching and teaching, or we're going to look up one day and we've abandoned the Great Commission for something a lot less holy.
I remember a good friend of mine, he made the statement, I can't hate somebody when I know their story. When you're curious and you learn somebody's story, how does it change how you feel about them? Not you don't just know their story. What does it change inside your engine room when you see, oh, so that might be why you believe that or think that?
Yeah. Nobody knows what you know. Nobody cares what you know until they know you care, right? And
Right.
I do think empathy is a powerful preaching tool. When empathy, I'm aware of their pain. I have understood their pain. Maybe I've experienced the pain that they're feeling. I think that's a power. It calms your preaching down. You become less
Mm-hmm.
angry. You're more inviting. You're more welcoming. I'm not at all violating the core convictions of Orthodox Christianity. In fact, I think I'm following the Orthodox teachings of Christianity. This past weekend, as we record this, I preached out of John chapter 8, the woman caught in adultery. Okay, so Jesus is confronted with this woman who's caught in the act of adultery, was a very perverse thing in Jewish culture. But again, Jesus asked her questions. And he goes, where are your accusers? He goes, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. So before he told her to go and sin no more, he gave her a cup of grace. He said, listen, I don't condemn you either. Now, that doesn't mean to go out right back out and do what you were doing. I forgive you. I give you grace. Now go take that grace and live a better life. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make. Was Jesus condoning adultery? No, of course not. Was he condoning shame and guilt and embarrassment that crowd was trying to force upon that woman? Of course not. He looked at her, he gave her a chance to receive grace, and then he sent her out with a holy charge. Go and live the better life. Go and do what God's called you to do. Go and sin no more.
That's powerful. That is powerful. And I tell you what, man, Jesus just left a textbook. He left a textbook of how to do all these things. In this last one, I think he modeled so well too. It's the practice of service. It's the practice of serving others. You've got 8 and they're all amazing. I don't want to give away the whole book, but you unpack the story of the great leader Nehemiah, how Nehemiah caught this burden for his homeland. What do we learn from Nehemiah that we need in our lives if we're going to make the difference that I think we're called to make?
Well, Nehemiah was living a really good life. I mean, he was in the Persian capital. He was a cupbearer to the king. He had silk sheets he was sleeping on every night. He had plenty of food, good wine. He was living a luxurious life when some people believe it was his biological brother that brought the news to him about the conditions of Jerusalem. Now, we don't know that for sure. It's kind of a traditional story. But anyway, someone brought him the news that Jerusalem was in ruins. And for whatever reason, this particular report crushed him. The Bible says he sat and wept. Now, he had heard bad news from, he was in the presence of the king who was hearing bad news all over the kingdom. But for whatever reason, that story about Jerusalem wrecked him. And here's what I say to people. I cannot go and fix all of the injustices in the world. I can't go into every neighborhood in Central America and bring hope and healing, but I can go into 1 or 2. I can't go into Gaza or West Bank or the northern parts of Jordan and settle all that, but maybe there's a family I can help. And so what I would say is pay attention to what moves you. Pay attention to a micro story that does something inside you, because that could be the very thing that the Lord's calling you to fix. I know we made a shift in our mission spending at our church probably 8 or 9 years ago. It was 2016 during that election when everybody was complaining about the open border. And I agree that we have a mess at the border. I mean, it's a mess. It's a political mess. It's a humanitarian mess. It's really complicated and it's a mess. We can all agree on that. So I said to my staff, let's find 2 or 3 communities in Central America and let's bring them clean water. Let's bring them schools. Let's help a church in that community. Let's help them with jobs. And so we did. We are now working in a community outside Guatemala City. They have a school. They're getting health care. They're getting 2 meals a day. We just drilled the first clean water well that community's had ever. They're getting really clean water, which, most of the illnesses in the third world are waterborne illnesses. So if a community can get clean water, it solves a lot of the poverty issues in the community because they're not sick. And so we have a school. We are feeding them. This is almost 300 kids now that we're helping in this one community alone. So can I fix all the problems in Guatemala? No, but I can fix some problems in that one community.
That's right.
And I think that's the mindset that we have to have is you can be overwhelmed by all the violence, the evil, the things that are happening around the world, but take ownership of one small thing. One person in your neighborhood, one person in your community, one family. And take it for a 3 to 5 year stretch. Say, I'm going to spend 3 to 5 years with a small group of people doing something that's going to change their outlook and change the outcomes. I think that's the key for us being evangelistic. I think that's the key to us being on mission.
You have a powerful quote in the book. You said, whenever I train young leaders, I tell them that they won't know if they have an appetite for humility until they've had the first taste of success. Why can success blind our hearts and really destroy the servant uh humility that we began with? What would you say?
Well, no, here I am talking about a book I wrote, and so I want to be careful that I understand the need to talk about projects. And when you wrote a book or you got something that you think might be helpful to people, it is completely okay to
Yep.
tell people about something that can help them. But I'm not promoting myself, and I'm not promoting.
That's
You
right.
have to be careful that who are we promoting? Why are we talking about this? And is the motive really to help other people? That's the idea of serving.
Yep.
Is that I'm doing this not to put the spotlight on myself or to gain some kind of acclaim. I'm doing this because I care deeply about people that have been forgotten, people that are hurting. The old saying is humility is not thinking less of yourself; it's just thinking of yourself less.
Mm, mm,
So it's not self-deprecation. It's not saying, "Hey, I'm a knucklehead." I mean, I have self-deprecating humor, but at some point you have to have the confidence to do the work,
that's
or,
right.
or you get the work done. So I'm grateful for confidence. I'm grateful for boldness, but also know that I'm doing this for something bigger than me. We're
Mm,
we're doing this to reveal God's kingdom on the earth. We're not doing it to build our own minor kingdoms. We're doing it to reveal God's kingdom on the earth to people that need to see that. So I just really say this to young leaders. We're not going to stand before God and hear him say, "Well done, my good and faithful influencers."
mm,
There's such an attraction to that. I get it. It's powerful. And I don't mind if I tell young leaders that if fame finds you, then find someone to help you manage it. But don't go out looking for fame. It'll destroy your life. I have watched too many young leaders go out to chase fame. They're chasing acclaim, they're chasing fortune, they're chasing power. And once they catch it, it destroys them.
yep.
So if fame and attention and a good reputation finds you, then surround yourself with people that'll help you manage that well. But don't go looking for it. Keep your head down, do your work, be faithful, and let the Lord lift you up in due time.
You make a statement in that chapter. Take the high road by going low. What does that mean?
Well, it just means when you have an opportunity to get back at someone, when you have an opportunity to set things right, resist that. Don't. I mean, being right that's not our reason for
Mm,
existing on the earth, right? I'm not here to win an argument. Be kind. I just think it's one of the most underused fruits of the spirit right now is kindness.
mm,
Such a low bar, right? I mean, I told my staff the other day, I said, listen, if you can't be kind, you can't work for me.
mm.
That's how low the bar is. Okay.
That's
Just
right.
not be truthful, be honest, be ambitious. I don't mind any of that. Be creative, be innovative. But in all of that, do it with kindness. And I think when you are around someone who's really kind, you want to be around them forever. You just love being around kind people. And that's what I meant when I wrote that. Let's get back to being a people of kindness.
I love that. You talk also in that chapter about talking, you talk about serving the one that's nearby. What is the power when we can wake up every day and begin to look out and see the people nearby us? Yes, we all want to go to Central America, and I'll be taking a baseball group of college coaches to the DR in November, which will be awesome. Teaching baseball in the DR and doing a little scouting for the high school I coach at. But we'll be down there in the DR, which will be fun. But what is the power of serving the one that God sends our way? They're
Yeah.
already nearby. What does that do for our soul?
Well, I tell my leadership team that I ask them, who are you responsible to pastor today? And they'll
Mm,
look at me, and of
mm,
course they know the answer is whoever's in front of you. That's who you're responsible to bless today. Whoever the Lord puts in front of you. Think about the Good Samaritan. He was on his way, did not expect to see someone thrown in the ditch, but he did. He saw them. He dressed their wounds, took him to a inn and paid the innkeeper to take good care of him. And it turns out that the hero of that story is a Samaritan. and the Good Samaritan. And I think about all the time how willing he was willing to be inconvenienced. He was willing to have his calendar altered that day. He was willing to use his own resources to bless somebody. He woke up that, I know it's a parable, it's not a true story, but it's a beautiful parable that
Yep.
Jesus told to help us understand that you don't always know who's going to be in your path that day, but do you have time? Do you have empathy? And do you have money set aside in advance of that people, so that when you bump into the single mom, when you bump into the kid that can't go to camp, when you bump into whatever, the drug addict that needs to get into rehab, do you have the time? Do you have the sympathy? And do you have the money to help someone that God puts in front of you?
So good. Well, here's what I love. Number one, this book's fantastic. And I think it's something everybody needs to read, because these practices aren't rocket science. They are basic, simple things that if we can do them over and over and over, it can change the course of not only our life, but of the ripples we leave behind. I was at an event just recently with Dr. Sam Chand, who's one of my favorite people. And he said this statement. He said, I not only want to finish well, I want to be well when I finish. You and I talked about our laps. We're the time's ticking on both of us right now on the fourth quarter clock. What does being well when you finish this journey for your two children and your spouse and the church that you've led, what do you want to be being well at the finish line to look like for you?
I want to be a good human being at the end. And here's how I define that. Can I cry when I'm supposed to cry? Can I laugh when I'm supposed to laugh? Do I feel what I'm supposed to feel? Can I love when I'm supposed to love? Can I be a friend when I need to be a friend? That's what being fully human is. And I don't want to get to the end of my life being the old angry cynic, the broken down old curmudgeon. I want to be the jovial grandfather that tells the same joke every week out in the lobby of the church, and I expect people to laugh. I want to be a good human being. I want to be generous. I want to be fun. I want to be able. I want to care. I think we're looking out now. There's so much bad stuff going on that we're becoming cynics, and we're losing our ability to even care. And I realize that we have to protect our soul sometimes, and we can't take on every offense and every issue. But I want to care. I don't want to see a murder story and not care about the victim or care about justice being served. I want to care and be human at the end of this. And so I think that'll be all the challenge I will need. That'll be plenty challenge for me in the next 20 years.